Hello students. Today you're going to learn about key assumptions for your product, service, or nonprofit. Testing key assumptions is a very important step along the road to figuring out if your venture is a viable one and one that can actually operate as a business. So this deck will explain what that means, what I mean by testing key assumptions, how you can go about testing them on your own, and we're also going to work through a short worksheet that'll help you with the exercise. Let's dive right in. So, throughout this program so far, you've been working with your mentors on 4 key areas that you should be constantly thinking about when you're developing your product, service, or nonprofit. The first and most important is, what's the problem you're solving? Is it a big problem? Is it a small problem? Is it something that people face every day? And what is the solution to that problem? What's the solution that you're developing to solve a key problem that your potential customers or donors have every day? The third is, what is your business model? i.e., how does your venture, your product or service or nonprofit, make more money than it spends to develop the solution? And then finally, how do you get customers? These 4 areas are the key areas to developing a venture. And I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have begun to think about all 4 of these. But you've just been thinking. You've been coming up with guesses to answer these questions. And until you gather data, these answers are what we call assumptions. Much like a science experiment, you have a hypothesis that you're trying to prove. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take the most classic example of a business that a child would start, a lemonade stand. This is Timmy. This is his lemonade stand. And before he even sets up the lemonade stand, he has a number of assumptions that he is thinking about. It's hot out and my neighbors are thirsty, could be one. My neighbors like lemonade. I have a delicious lemonade recipe that I can make quickly. I can make a glass of lemonade for about 5 cents. I can sell a glass of lemonade for 20 cents. And finally, I have a location to sell lemonade. Now, before Timmy starts testing the answers to these questions, they're just guesses. How would he test them? Well, it's hot out and my neighbors are thirsty. That's pretty straightforward. Look at the temperature. My neighbors like lemonade. How could he do that? He could go door to door. He could ask his neighbors, do you like lemonade? I have a delicious lemonade recipe that I can make quickly. How could he test that? Well, he could go in his kitchen, he could make lemonade, and he could pick 5 or 10 or 15 people and give them a free sample. Give them questions. Do you like it? What would you change? Is it too sweet? Is it too tart? I can make a glass of delicious lemonade for about 5 cents. How can he test that or prove that? Well, just keep track of his ingredients when he makes his sample batch. I can sell a glass of delicious lemonade for 20 cents. How would he prove that? Well, he could ask, right? After he gives his friends and neighbors the sample lemonade, he could say, would you pay 20 cents for this? And I have a location to sell lemonade. Ask his parents or his friends or his neighbors for permission, right? So these are all the questions that Timmy needs to solve in order to have a real lemonade stand. And if any of these aren't true, he might not have a business. For example, if his neighbors don't like lemonade, it's doubtful that any of them are going to buy lemonade. So what we went through here are some methods to test your assumptions, right? You could talk directly to customers, and there are a number of different ways you could do this. You could do a survey. I know a lot of you have done surveys in the past. You could also do what we call a focus group. You could get a bunch of people in a room to play with your prototype or try your product and give you feedback. You could interview them. Another option is to talk directly to other companies in the industry. Some of you are doing projects where there are other folks out there doing similar things. Interview them. Get them on the phone. Get them on Skype. Send them email questions. Get a feel for how they approach the solution to the problem they're solving. You could build an early prototype and let people use it. In the case of Timmy's lemonade stand, his prototype would be his lemonade. Test it, have people give feedback on the taste and the quality before you spend the time and money to build a business. So building a prototype and letting people use it, that's another great way to test your assumptions. So your assignment for this week is first to come up with these assumptions. What are the key things that you're betting on being true in order for your business, service, or nonprofit to be successful? Then step 2, you're going to determine what you need to have happen for you to consider this assumption true. What would be a passing grade on a test? Okay, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I mean by that in a second. And then the third step is to test your assumptions. So let me show you the worksheet we're going to be working with this week. And as an example for this worksheet, I'm going to tell you about my brand new invention, which is a tennis ball launching machine. Okay? So this is the worksheet we're going to be working with this week. And these answers to these questions are really just placeholders. They're examples for me to show you guys. Okay? So this is the key assumptions worksheet. You'll see we have 3 columns. We have our assumption, what we would need happen for us to consider this assumption true, what would be, we call it passing, just like a passing grade. And then finally, the action steps you need to prove the assumption true. So in my case, I have this tennis ball launching machine, and my first assumption is that my tennis ball launching machine is cheaper to make than the other available options on the market. Because one of my competitive advantages, my unique selling proposition, is that I'm going to sell this tennis ball machine for less than other machines on the market. And the only way that I can do that is if it's cheaper to make, of course. So you can see my tennis ball launching machine is cheaper to make than the other available options. That's an assumption. It's a guess. How would I prove that? What would I need to do to prove that true? Well, I would build a prototype. And based on my prototype, I'm able to determine that it would cost 25% less to make my tennis ball launching machine than the other competitors on the market. Okay, well, what can I do to test that? Well, you'll see in action steps, I'm going to complete my prototype, and I'm going to carefully keep track of the cost of my materials and add them up. Another assumption that I have for my business is that my tennis ball launching machine will launch tennis balls 10 feet farther than the leading brand. Okay, so what is farther? How can I prove that that's true? Well, I've pretty straightforward. When comparing my prototype to the leading brand, tennis balls launched from my machine will travel 10 feet farther. Okay, and the action step to test that is to test my prototype against the leading brand. I'm going to go out to the football field. I'm going to launch my tennis balls as far as I can using my prototype, and then I'm going to compare that to the leading brand, my competitor. I also am assuming that people would want to buy my tennis ball launching machine, right? That I can get customers. So my assumption is that people would buy my tennis ball launching machine at $25 if it truly launches tennis balls farther than the leading brand. What's the passing grade? How do I know that that assumption is true? Well, I've decided that out of 100 people surveyed, if I can get 40 of them to say they'd pay $25 or more for my tennis ball launching machine, based on its description and a demonstration, then I'll consider my assumption true. How am I going to do that? Well, I've decided I'm going to develop a survey, and I'm going to distribute it to 2 types of people that I think could be my customers. Tennis players, I'll give it to 100 people that are tennis players, and I'll also give it to 100 pet owners, because I think pet owners may also want to launch tennis balls for their dogs to chase. So we're going to give you this worksheet. I'm going to include my examples in here. All you're going to do is simply delete them and put in your own assumption. Okay, and you'll take it from there. Pretty straightforward. So work closely with your mentor to fill out this sheet, and best of luck. And as always, you can contact me anytime, eglassman@sch.org. Thanks for your attention.